Welcome, cultists. And we're almost halfway through the year, and with it, the summer months. Are you dreading those long, hot days? If so, we have the perfect episode for you this time around. Stick with us, we have such sights to show you. That's right, we're opening that puzzle box you got from your strange uncle back in December and seeing what all the fuss is about. And for this month, as if you haven't guessed, we're going all the way back to 1987 for Clive Barker's Hellraiser. I'm DK, your watchman at the door for these little jaunts, but as usual, I'm not alone for this one. Today I'm being joined by a very special guest to visit this cinematic gem. He's been described by scriptwriter Peter Atkins as the world's leading expert on the Hellraiser films and their mythology, and even the master of horror himself, Clive Barker, describes him as the resident Hellraiser expert, which is kind of praise from Caesar indeed. He's the author of numerous articles on the subject, the book The Hellraiser Films and Their Legacy, editor of the anthology Hellbound Hearts, and the man behind the novel Sherlock Holmes and the Servants of Hell, as well as a plethora of horror and non-horror books and anthologies. It's the shadow writer himself, Mr. Paul Kane. How are you doing today, mate?
Hello. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm sure that introduction I gave doesn't do you enough justice. So for those out there who may not have
does. I'm sure it does.
For those out there who may not have picked the Kane book, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Incredibly, I've been writing professionally for 30 years. That's coming. That anniversary's coming up. I'm not really looking forward to it, but it just shows you how long I've been around, really, man and boy. And I've worked in all kinds of different genres and all kinds of different media. I'm probably most associated with, as you say, Hellraiser, the Hooded Man books from Abaddon, which revolve around a post-apocalyptic Robin Hood, and my work as Paul Kane for the HarperCollins HQ thrillers. I'm currently at about something like, it's over 100 books. It's probably closing in more on about 150. Well, not quite, not books, but like all releases in all kinds of formats. So I've done a lot of things. I've pretty much done everything, really.
It really is a pleasure to have you on the show with me today. I've been looking forward to this one, not just obviously because of the choice of movie, but the chance to get to talk to your good self. I mean, I'll be completely honest. It's a great chance for me to perhaps pick your brain on occasion, such as your knowledge of today's subject.
When we said we were doing this show, I mean, I haven't watched the film in quite a while, so I went back and revisited the film again, because obviously when you're working on things like Servants, you're rewatching things and the Hellbound Heart audio, you watch things and watch things and watch things. You kind of get a bit Hellraisered out. It's kind of overload, if that makes sense. So it was nice to come back again.
I'm glad you came back for us.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say now, I usually throw in little bits of trivia from the movies that we normally discuss, but I get the feeling that there's nothing I can throw your way that you wouldn't already know. But if you have any observations, please feel free to share them, because chances are listeners may not know, and I'll be among them.
I'll try if I can remember them. I mean, you said pick my brains. What's left of my brains, I think. But I will do my best anyway.
No worries. Now, normally at this point, we back and forth with our guests on their favorite movies, and that before we get to discussing today's subject. But because you've graciously taken the time out to join us, I figured I'd give the listeners a chance to get to know you by asking a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I'll start off with, just one off the top of my head while you're here. It's not just horror that you're a fan of, but looking at your social media accounts, you're quite the purveyor of media, of all genres, really. You seem to have a great love of what I would say well-told stories, which obviously helps. Do you have any particular favorites when it comes to your viewing pleasure, as it were?
Oh, God, that's a big question. I mean, all kinds of things, really. You hit the nail on the head, not to, if you'll excuse the pun. I'm a fan of all kinds of literature, all kinds of media, audio books, TV, films. I just kind of absorb it all. It's a bit of a misspent childhood as well, kind of watching things and reading things, and comics and My dad used to take me when he used to take my mum to the Keep Fit classes. I'd only be very little, about, I don't know, 4 or 5 or something, and he'd take me across the road to the newsagents and buy me a comic every week. So I used to look forward to, like, my mum, when are you going, when are you going to do your exercises, so I can get a Batman comic. so I was kind of exposed to it from a very, very early age, and hats off to my late dad. He kind of introduced me to the genre, and I became a fan of it through that. When we used to kind of watch things together, like Star Trek and the Incredible Hulk and things like that. So when you say what have I got any particular favorites, it's like, I mean, as much as I love Hellraiser, there are other films that I love equally as much, like Jaws and Alien, and there were just so many that I could name off the top of my head. It's like, how long is a piece of string, really? So
if I may ask, what prompted you taking up writing? Was there a particular life event, or was it something that you'd had an interest in? You mentioned you read a lot, with the comic. Did that have any part in it?
Yeah, I think it was just like an attraction to stories, as you say, stories, characters, and just that even before I could sort of read, I was looking at like the pictures in books and things, and in comics and whatever, and just seeing like the stories there, or playing little kind of like scenarios and stories in my mind with my little figures and things when I was a little kid. So it's always been with me, that kind of like telling stories, whether it was just to myself or like wanting to do it, to tell stories to other people. When people, when kids used to come around and play around at our house, I'd always come up with these scenarios, like in the back garden, landing on an alien world or something, or like in Star Trek. So the stories have always kind of been there, I think, and they've kind of grown into stuff like writing and drawing my own comic books when I was only really little, just starting out with it, like fledgling kind of little stories and drawing them, and that kind of developed into like English classes where I would write. They'd give us they say, write a short story for this week's assignment, and I'd go overboard. It'd be like pages and pages, and they go, we can't, and it'd just be like wanting to tell a story, wanting to like get it out of me, and wanting to sort of like tell, having an audience, I suppose, even if it was your teacher, and sort of, I mean, getting into things like gaming and stuff when I was very young, and sort of role playing and role playing games and such. But I mean, just like reading and absorbing everything, like I say, TV, film, and just absorbing stuff, and starting to read, things like ghost stories, which the latest collection kind of like riffs on a little bit. Dark Reflections, which is going back to those supernatural stories like the M.R. Jameses and the Poes and things that I was like reading when I was perhaps in, like not quite in secondary school, but so just kind of getting into reading horror and supernatural stuff. And before that, things like Enid Blyton I was reading. There's one called The House in the Fog that I really like, which is where this fog, like dense fog comes around this boy, and he gets lost, and there's this weird house and he starts to grow like a basil brush tail and things, and so all the kind of like surreal stuff, and that I was attracted to. So starting out with that, and then you kind of like gravitate towards things like James Herbert and Ramsey Campbell, and obviously people that were around that you go to your local bookshop and they'll be on the shelves in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, Guy and Smith, all these people, Anne Rice. So I'd be reading all these kind of books and comics and seeing all this TV stuff and film and everything. And my mum had this old battered typewriter that, was kind of, the ribbon was, you could barely see it. So I was kind of like tapping away on that and trying to like write my own stories. And it was just kind of trying to, I suppose, be involved in that, I didn't have any kind of aspirations to do it for a living or anything, but it was just that's how it started. It was just like, it wasn't really one thing. It was like a build-up of like a volcano, like a build-up of like wanting to tell stories. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, that's brilliant, mate. Thank you. I mean, when it comes to your writing, and I'm not just talking about the horror side of things here, I'm about the thrillers and the anthologies. Is there anything in particular that inspires you? I mean, where do you kind of get your ideas? Is it an offshoot of all the reading that you've done, or do you pick up things in day-to-day life?
It's everywhere. I mean, I used to teach a creative writing class about 10 years ago. I think I finished, but and I was teaching that for a good like 6, 7, 8 years. And I always used to say to students, it's like everywhere. That the ideas are everywhere. Just like whether it's watching a TV news item or picking a newspaper up or just like listening. I'm not advocating listening to conversations on buses or restaurants or anything like that, but you do kind of can't help hearing them sometimes. It's like, and a little snatch of conversation could just be, well, he didn't do that, did he? And you just go, hold on a minute, so and that could like spark an idea. And it's just everywhere. I mean, something like the Gemini Factor, which was like, I would classify my first proper go at a novel, although I have gone back and I'm sort of rewriting an earlier one than that now at the moment to kind of put it out as a curiosity. But the Gemini Factor began as an article in a newspaper. That was just like reading an article about twins and how they, one twin might experience the same thing as the other twin, and even if one passed away, it could be like they still kind of feel their presence or whatever. And I just thought, what an interesting idea that is. And I just took it and I just expanded that, and just kind of like characters started to occur to me and what I could do with it. But all kinds of things. I mean, before was an interest in past lives, so that just grew from there, and just wanting to kind of explore things like good versus evil, and the grey areas in between and things. And I, it's just finding something that kind of hooks you. At the moment, I'm going through a collection, a Mortis Man collection, which goes back to the comics. And I did my own version of that for the Death collection years ago, called The Return of Mortis Man, which is my horror superhero. So I'm going through those stories now. There's like 3 novellas, and that was just basically inspired by comics. It's a love of comics, Spider-Man, Batman, all kinds of things. So they're everywhere. The ideas are everywhere. I mean, people get writer's block. I mean, I couldn't write very, very much in the pandemic. I got to a certain point and it was just like I couldn't write because so much was going on. But I do think writer's block as such can be fixed a little bit by like doing exercises and trying to come up with ideas, like watching things on TV or going to newspapers or what have you, and just flicking through them. But I've always got notebooks. I've got loads of notebooks next to me on the couch, But yeah, they're all around you all the time, ideas.
Nice. When it comes to things like drafts, how many drafts would you say that you do? Do you work on it constantly, or?
It depends, really, in a way. I mean, if it's something that's like I've got 3 short stories that I'm sort of in the middle of. I've got to start writing them soon because they're due in, not too distant future. But I'm sort of writing them in my head, if that makes sense. So it's like when I actually come to write them, it won't take me too long to write them, hopefully, touch wood. But it will be like a draft that's almost gone through several drafts in my head. So I'm kind of doing it in my head as I'm, sitting here thinking. Writers talk a lot about like just staring into space, or if you're doing the pots or something and you're just kind of staring and somebody will say something to you and you go, what? Sorry, I was miles away. It's because you're kind of thinking about your story. You're thinking, well, where would it go now? Where would it do? So I have that little notebook next to me, and anything that occurs to me about any of those stories, it's like, and I do a little kind of like almost. I mean, a lot of people don't with short stories, but I do a little kind of like outline, a little plot or whatever, even if it's a short story, just how I'm going to get from A to B, and what might happen in the middle section, and what a background might be for a certain character, and it all just seems to slot into place. So I don't do that many drafts when I sit down to do it, but I've probably done quite a few in my head before. as preparation for sitting down, because it just seems to kind of flow out of me when it happens. It just kind of, I go into like a fugue state, and it just kind of, I emerge and I go, oh, I've done 3,000 words.
I am so much.
But it's a lot of work. There's a lot of kind of brain power beforehand, if that makes sense. It's kind of thinking about it constantly and juggling lots of different jobs as well. So
Well, I mean, speaking of the obviously the episode that we're on, what first attracted you to the world of Hellraiser? What is it about the mythos of this that you find so alluring, as it were?
I think I've just always been attracted. I mean, I've just done a piece for Phantasmagoria magazine about the sequels. I've been writing about it, so it's quite timely. This episode I've just been writing about it, so it's always really been with me since the 80s. You know, since I read The Hellbound Heart, and since I wasn't old enough to see Hellraiser at the cinema, but I borrowed it from somebody afterwards, and I obviously seen photographs in magazines and film magazines, and it's always just attracted me. And I think, like a lot of people, it's that image of Pinhead with all the nails banged into his head and the grid, and everything. But then when you come to read the story and you watch the film and everything, it's that kind of like, it's a new way of summoning demons. It's a new way, but a very old way. Because if you go back, obviously there are things that, in Legacy that I wrote about, like Pandora's Box and, the Faustian Pact and everything else. So it's a kind of an old idea, because Clive's a big fan of, literature and everything else. And he's took pieces from various Vesuvius or Vesalius illustrations of the skinless man, and things like that, little pieces from here and there. And it's just throwing that stuff together to make something new, I think. And it's like, used to have like little pen, to summon demons, you'd use the fire and the pentangles and things like that, and the devil rides out and all that kind of business. And it was just a new way of kind of undoing the puzzle, solving a puzzle and letting this out of this box. And it was just such a fresh idea. And of course, running alongside that, you've got this family drama, with Frank. Yeah. And coming in and obviously seducing his brother's wife, and then you got Ashley as Kirsty, and all this kind of like kitchen sink drama stuff, while there's a guy up in the attic who's basically been coming back to life and being fueled by blood. And so it's like, it's just that kind of like collision of things, I think, was just so, I've never seen anything like it, and never really have since, to be honest with you. Nothing that's kind of got me like that, and it's always been with me. It's always that you'll stop and kind of think, oh well, what about that bit in what is it, Hellbound or something like that, and you'll just be thinking about it for a minute. Well, I will anyway. But it's always been with me, basically. Is the it just got me at the right time in my life and just stayed with me. I always say it's an obsession, which is a bit like people chasing the puzzle box and trying to solve it. Has been my obsession with Hellraiser, really.
Well, you've delved into obviously the mythos several times, and you've become more than just a fan. From that viewpoint, what is it like to play in that sandbox? With these characters.
Well, I would argue that I'm still really a fan. It's that it all stems from being a fan. It's not, I'll never not be a fan of it. It's always there. It's that fan side of me that drives everything, really, whatever I'm doing, whether it's Hellraiser related or not. But it's kind of simultaneously exciting and it's a privilege, obviously, but it's also utterly terrifying, because obviously this thing is beloved by so many people, and if you get it wrong, I mean, it's one thing to be playing in people's sandboxes, and go, oh, this is great, but if you do something that people hate, that's the other side of it. That luckily, Servants worked, and people really love it. And but there was a point where I was writing that and editing it, and I kind of just stepped back and looked at it and said to myself, I could end up pissing off two lots of fan bases here.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, I don't do things by halves. And I think that's where the fan in me helps, really, because if it's something that I would like to read myself, then I figure that somebody else would probably want to read it as a fan, so it's kind of terrifying, but it is a privilege to work, and you have help from a lot of people. I mean, Clive helped massively on Servants. So he helped with the shaping of that book. So it's like a lot of people help you down along the way. That I owe a great debt of gratitude to. Marie, for one, looked at drafts of the book, and she looks at a lot of my work. I mean, we're very busy at the moment, so we're not having time to look at each other's work. But a lot of people help you along the way. All the editors, all the writers that help you. It's a very kind of like, I've always found it a very inclusive and very sort of helpful, writers community, whether it's horror or crime or whatever you're involved in. So you do have help from a lot of people and a lot of support, and so you can't do it on your own. And the best you can hope for is that you don't cock it up.
Yeah,
because you soon get told.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'm in a few fandoms, and if a fandom doesn't like something, they will let you know. So
yeah.
I'd love to know how did Sherlock Holmes and the Servants of Hell come about? What was the thought processes that led to that one?
Well, it was, again, it's like going way back to the 80s, and obviously reading Clive's work and being a fan of Clive's work and the Books of Blood and all the little bits in there that led to Hellraiser and then the Hellbound Heart novella. And at the same time, sort of, I talked about watching things with my dad, and we used to watch the Granada Sherlock Holmes. So I would have only been about probably 10 or something, 10, 11, something like that. And Jeremy Brett, obviously the governor. For me, Jeremy Brett just, again, it hit me at the right time. And it was like, this is Sherlock Holmes. This is the proper, this is the business, because they took it seriously. The street was there. The costumes were there. It was a period drama. And that kind of like crossover there stayed with me, through writing Hellraiser films and their legacy, and all through like 20 odd years, it's kind of stayed with me, that kind of collision of two things. Because I always thought there is a side to Hellraiser that goes back in time to like the 1800s and what have you, obviously in the fourth film, especially. And there was an idea where Jack the Ripper was going to be involved in the Hellraiser story in number 4. So it's not too far off the mark. So I was thinking, well, and also for me, Sherlock Holmes has always had a horror side to him. And I was writing a few horror Sherlock Holmeses for Charles Prepelec. I had to go at one of them that crossed over with the Red mythology that I've done, which is a werewolf stuff. Oh, yeah. I mean, just been released as a trilogy by Hellbound. And I was writing a few horror Sherlock Holmeses, and it kind of resurfaced that idea of doing a horror Sherlock Holmes. And at the same time, we were editing the Hellbound Hearts anthology, myself and Marie. So I'm always one of these people that we edit these things and we pitch these cool ideas, and then you think to yourself, well, I can't put myself in that because I'm editing it. so you kind of think, you're kind of frustratedly thinking, how can I write a Hellraiser story? Because I really would love to write a Hellraiser story, because it's basically like an anthology that took its cue from the epic comics back in the 90s, which were all very much like a Twilight Zone type of, different story per.
Yeah, I was addicted to that series.
Loved it. Loved the whole thing. I loved the Boom ones as well. But there was it was that episodic sort of like anthology type thing, the epic comics. So we wanted to do that in prose form. So we got all these great stories in, and we put the book together and everything. And I was still frustratedly trying to think of a way that I could write a Hellraiser story somehow. And then it occurred to me the Hellraiser Holmes kind of thing coming together, and then the kind of synopsis and the chapter breakdown just sort of flowed again. It just seemed to come. Well, I thought to myself, Sherlock Holmes, lock room mysteries. And I thought, well, there's no greater lock room mystery than Frank disappearing in in the film. He's there one minute, he's gone the next. No trace of him, no trace of the blood, nothing, no chains. So I thought, what if Sherlock Holmes comes across something like that? And the rest is kind of history. So I kind of plucked up the courage to run it by Clive, like I say, and we were working with Clive on a few things back then. So. And he loved it, and he just said, this is, I think this works. And he, kindly took me by the hand, and we sort of developed it a bit. And obviously I was working for Abaddon Rebellion at the time, so it was just a case of finding a publisher. So I felt confident enough to kind of go and chat to my editors there and say, what do you think of this idea? And they just thought it was fantastic. They just went, yes, can we? So then there was kind of backwards and forwards with the right stuff and all the rest of it. And it was just when I think Holmes had just gone out of copyright, at the time, and obviously you needed Clive's permission to do a Hellraiser story because he owns the literary rights. So it was that kind of I'd got permission to do it basically. I mean, I get asked a lot about a film version of it, and it's like I'd love to see a film version of it, but the rights for any kind of film or TV version of that would be a minefield. And also, it would take a budget in excess of like an Avengers film. So,
yeah, I have to say, I did love the novel, and you do, as I say, you don't mess around. You jump into the boots of both franchises. And it works so well. When you're reading it, you're just thinking, why has something like this never happened before? Because it's just, I listeners, if you haven't read it and you're just tuning in to listen about the movie, I urge you to get a copy of that book, because
thank you.
It's just brilliant.
Just basically the fan thing carried me along, and it just kind of it's one of those things again. If something doesn't exist and you think it might be quite cool to do that, it's probably going to be something quite special. Hellraiser films and their legacy didn't exist, and I wanted to do a BFI type of book, like the Mark Kermode Exorcist book, or Ann Bilson's The Thing. So I was thinking maybe, I don't know, 20,000 words on the original film, and I couldn't get that published anywhere. And I'd written like the sample things, and I couldn't get it published because I did film studies at uni, Sheffield Hallam. So I did a BA in history of art, design, and film, and then I did a film studies MA. So I got I knew how to write about film in that way, but also hopefully make it accessible. So it didn't exist. The film book about the entire franchise just didn't exist. And I got this letter from a publisher from McFarlane, and they said, would you be interested in writing about all of the films? And I remember going to Marie, we were best friends at the time. This was before we got together, before we got married. And I said, I don't know about this. It's going to be a lot of work, and I'm going to have to be analysing all the films and everything. And she said, just do it, because if you don't do it, you'll regret it. And it's something that doesn't exist that people will love. And she wasn't wrong. I mean, 20 years later, people are still coming up, writing to me or coming up to me at conventions or whatever. It's still earning money. It's like, it's something that I'm very glad I did. And it just didn't exist. That's why I did it. Same with Servants of Hell. It didn't exist, and now it does. So it's so if you've got that idea, whatever it is, if you've got an idea and you think that'd be quite cool to do, don't give up. Just keep trying to sell it somewhere. Keep trying to. There'll be somebody who's interested in it if it's a good idea, and if it's something that you would like to see yourself, then chances are there'll be other people that will want to see that as well.
Had you met Clive before you got into it as a professional aspect, or was the books, what led you to meet him, as it were?
It was a kind of, again, it was a combination of things. I started out as a journalist back in the 90s, so I've been a professional writer for nearly 30 years. So I was doing articles and going off to press screenings and things. But again, it was like a combination of things that sort of, I was already like interviewing people for magazines and doing sort of like genre stuff and bits and bobs of writing about, like when Independence Day came out and stuff like that, and interviewing people and special effects people or whatever. And then I wrote to Marie. I set up a website, the Shadow Writer site, which is still going. Looks a bit retro now, I know, but Marie keeps saying, "Oh, you need to update it." But it's like I quite like the retro think of it. And I wrote to Marie to be my guest writer, so I, became friends with Marie. And then she brought me into the British Fantasy Society. So she was already heavily involved in it. She was editing some of their publications, and they had this thing called a special publications editor, which was, you'd kind of put books together, and there'd be a bit of money like from the membership to do it. They kind of saved a bit of money from the membership, but also they might want to sell it at conventions as well. And we did this Green Knight calendar, which had a gorgeous kind of Les Edwards cover. There's another, Hellraiser, Clive Barker connection, Les Edwards. And we wrote to Clive to see if he'd introduce it. And he said yes, kindly. We had people like Neil Gaiman in there, China Mabel, and Clive said yes, and he did the introduction. And then we kind of got to know Clive that way. And then the book came out, and we had the launch for it. And I knew Steve Jones introduced me to Doug Bradley, and we sort of started drinking a little bit of the BFS dues, and then we had the launch for Legacy, and a few other people came along to that, like Barbie, who I know very well now, and Nick Vince and Simon Bamford, and just like the Hellraiser crowd, and it just kind of like, oh, this is fantastic, in a pub in London, just like, getting drunk and celebrating the book, and then Clive came along to Nottingham FantasyCon, so that's when we met him for the first time. I think that was 2006. And I interviewed him on stage, and we went to the Trip to Jerusalem pub afterwards, and it was just like, am I dreaming? It's like, am I going to wake up soon? But it was just fantastic, and that's how we kind of got to know him, and we felt comfortable enough to pitch the Hellbound Hearts thing to him, and obviously Servants after that, and it was quite timely, really, because Scarlet Gospels was coming out around that time as well. So it was like a lot of shops were selling Servants of Hell and Scarlet Gospels together when it came out in paperback. So that was a really cool thing as well.
Nice. Serendipity.
That's it. It's all just kind of like I'm very lucky, very fortunate to met these people and to work with these people. I know how lucky I am, because it is basically just a fan's dream. It was my dream. I never thought back in the 70s, 80s, watching things and reading things, that I'd ever meet people. I never thought I'd meet and be friends with people like Ramsey Campbell. I love Ramsey to bits. Yeah. Ramsey and Jenny are two of my favorite people. It's and just people like that. Mike Marshall Smith. Just when you're having a drink, sometimes you just kind of go, I was reading your stuff back in like the 90s before I knew you. It's quite surreal, really, in a way. But yeah, so we got to know him that way, basically, Clive.
I've noticed that like Clive, I mean, obviously Clive does some illustrations in his earlier books, and I've noticed that you have a tendency, when on requested at conventions and stuff like that, to also do little illustrations in your books. Is that something that you like to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't start doing that until people used to come up to me and ask me. There was somebody at one of the signings in Liverpool, Waterstones 1, when they used to do like the readings there, and I think, Twisted Tales, I think they were called back in the day. This is like 10, 12, 13 years ago. And somebody came up to me then and asked me to do a remark in a book. And I thought, what do you mean? Like a comment on that? do you want me to say something, derogatory about you? I didn't know what a remark was. So I went away and I kind of said, yeah, sure, I'll doodle, draw something in there, because I've also got like a background in art as well. I went to art college before I went to uni, so I had kind of dreams of maybe doing something comic book, illustrator, something like that. That was what I was hoping to do when I left school, and then then that kind of morphed a little bit into special effects, and then they ended up doing neither of those two things. So. But I'm trained in kind of art. We did all the life study classes, and and so that I took that thing from when I was a little kid doing the comics and sort of ran with that as well. And we had exhibitions and things. I got more into photography and making films and such when I was at Chesterfield College, just to give them a plug. And then years later, I ended up teaching there for a few years. But I love doing. I mean, I'm kind of out of practice. I do them every now and again for people, I mean, some of the ones that take me quite a long time. Like I did a lot for Servants. I did like the Cenobites that I created. I did like Glass and Fist, people like that.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So so they're more elaborate. So I had to charge for those because it took me a while to do them. But just a little kind of swiggle or something, do a little puzzle box in a thing, or just a little drawing while somebody's in front of me and wanting something signing. I'll always do. I'm always happy to do any of that stuff. But yeah, so there is kind of a parallel of I don't know whether it was a kind of a hero worship of Clive that sort of led to the art, or whether it was some some serendipity or what, I don't know. But yeah, I've got that art side to me as well. I've dabbled in a lot of areas.
So, a bit like Frank.
A bit like Frank, yeah. He dabbles in a different way.
Yeah. You went on to adapt the Hellbound Heart itself for audio. Again, I'd like to ask how that came about, and how did you find that experience?
I would have never have thought to do that at all. It wasn't something that I was going around pitching. It was Simon Barnard at Bafflegab came to me and said, obviously they've got this audio company and they do lots of Hammer stuff and all the rest of it. And I mean, they did a really good adaptation of The Ash Tree, which was written by Matt Holness. And he said, I really want to do an adaptation of the Hellbound Heart, and that book inside out, back to front. How would you feel about writing an audio of it? And I was like, I've never done an audio. never done one in my life. Don't know how to format it. And he said, right, we'll sort all that out. And he sent me some sample scripts and it took me by the hand and sort of like helped me with things like special effects, sound effects and things and all the rest of it. And we just took it from there. And, the sort of the expansion of the book, in some little scenes that I added to that, they were all me. They were all kind of like, Kirsty working at the office and stuff like that. And I wanted to kind of bring it back to the Britishness of the book, because it is a British book. It's set here, and it's in a weird kind of like American English world. The film, isn't it?
Do you know that's one of the things that we're going to bring up with you later? It's so confusing sometimes watching it.
Yeah, it kind of flips.
They're obviously in the UK, but everyone has an American accent.
Yeah, and they were kind of British, clearly British people like Julia, who's back on her home turf, and then suddenly you've got this American guy trying to chat up Kirsty, and he's like. So is he staying in and he seems to be kind of staying over here, but then again he talks like it's America. So it's kind of, it's really weird. It's really weird.
And then Kirsty brings up that thing later on saying, you're all so proper, and he says, I beg your pardon, and she says, see, and you think
we're not all proper.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and again, I mean, the writing is just one aspect of that audio thing, and I had a lot of help with it, and I'm very grateful to Simon. But he invited me to the recording of it, and obviously like the acting talent as well. The same thing with Hellraiser. It's the acting talent in Hellraiser. They knock it out the park, and people like Alice Lowe as Kirsty and Tom Meaton as Rory and Frank, because he plays both. Again, Neve McIntosh as Julia. Nick Vince was in it as a Cenobite. Eve Dorney played a female Cenobite before the film version that came out a couple of years ago. So it was like, I mean, they'd already done like Kirsty as a Cenobite or lead Cenobite in the comics, in the Boom comics. But on the cover of our audio was this female Cenobite before the film. So that's kind of, I'm quite proud of that. Quite proud that we did that we kind of brought that forward. But again, the talent was just, I was sat watching the recording of it and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. How they could just go into these characters. You could be sat having a sandwich with them in the green, in the green room, and then they go into the booth and they just become Frank or Julia or just the talent was, so we all the stars aligned again. So yeah, but I'm very lucky that you got in touch with me, Simon, and asked me to do it, because it was just a great experience. I'd love to do another one at some point. If anybody's listening, audio, well, I'd love to do another audio at some point. But yeah, it was great, and people seem to love it. We got some great reviews. We got interviewed by places like SFX and Starburst, and people just seem to go nuts for it. I'm very, very blessed. People seem to love it. So I'm very grateful.
That's awesome. You mentioned you'd love to do another. I mean, do you have any plans to continue working in the Hellraiser mythos? Anything that you've banding about, in your head?
Not at the moment. I mean, obviously there are things you bandy around in your head, and there are ideas you'd like to develop for never say never. But at the moment we're sort of just very busy doing other things. Like doing the anthologies with Marie. Doing a Christmas crime one at the moment, which is a different thing. Again, I like doing different things. I like doing something different every time. So we're doing the Christmas crime one. That's been a lot of fun. And obviously I'm writing those short stories at the moment. I did some theatre stuff last year, so that was quite fun, for a place called Hideout. And it's actually an adaptation of The Torturer, which is a short film that Joe Manco directed as well, with Paul T. Taylor, who played Pinhead later on down the line after Doug, and Lawrence Fernando. So just like doing different things. I mean, I don't like to repeat myself, even if I'm doing like a sequel to something. Like I did the Gemini Effect last year, which is like 20 years after I wrote the Gemini Factor, and I had an idea for a sequel. So how to develop that, and if people read the Red trilogy, I wrote the first novella and didn't have any thought of kind of continuing that on. In fact, it was kind of a bit of an exercise in how do I do this now? And anybody who's, I won't spoil it for people who haven't read it, but how do you actually take the end of Red and carry that on into a sequel? And I did 2 sequels after that. So, but they were very different. The second one continued on from the first, and the third one was post-apocalyptic. So it was like, you can't get any more different than those 3 those 3 things. So I do like doing lots of different things. I would always do something Hellraiser related. In fact, there's I don't know if I'm allowed to say, I think I probably am allowed to say this. I've said it at conventions, but myself and Tim Leben, my friend Tim Leben, we actually pitched for the Hellraiser remake when they were doing going around and asking authors to pitch ideas. So, if something ever comes of that, maybe one day, because they didn't go with that idea in the end, but you never say never. There's things that you could do. There are things that, in any of your mythos that you work in, there are ways of kind of pulling on a thread and just finding a different way of doing things. So yeah, I'd always go back to that mythology in a heartbeat, really.
Cool. Well, I mean, you mentioned you do a lot. You are incredibly prolific. To different aspects of horror fantasy, but then you moved into thriller territory with Husband's Grave and A Last Secret.
Yeah.
What would you say are the different challenges, if any, with that genre compared to the ones that you're more, well, I'll not say more known for, but the ones that you've had a lot more experience in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always been a fan of thrillers and crime books, and Ian Rankin's Rebus books and things, and the Colin Dexter's, I love the Morse books. I've always kind of read crime as well. And when you think about it, like Gemini Factor is basically a police procedural, but it has a horror elements to it. It has a horror kind of like stalk and slash element to it. So there are similarities to some of the procedurals. I mean, Hannibal Lecter got adopted by the horror community. It's like, is he horror? Is he crime? I mean, it's a procedural. There's some stuff in some crime books that you'd look at that and go, God, you wouldn't see that in an 80s paperbacks from hell. So I think there's there is an overlap there. There's a kind of, and if you think about a lot of the, I don't know, Jim Herbert books and Sean Hudson's and the Graham Mastersons and that there would be a detective in a lot of them who was trying to figure out who'd done the crimes, and it might be a werewolf or it might be whatever. There might be an investigative, or there always was an investigative like aspect to it, whether it was a journalist looking into it or whatever. So it's kind of not far from horror, really. There are parallels to it, and I do plot, which I think helps. I do like chapter breakdowns and plots and little character sketches and things like that, and what their backgrounds are and things. So and it's all about character. It's all about like character and situations. And I mean, her last secret is the lengths that his strange father will go to investigate who killed his daughter. And you've got him dealing with things like his ex-wife. So you've got again like the kitchen sink drama stuff, but also at the running through all that is he's trying to find. He's obviously trying to make up for something that he never got to speak to his daughter before something happened to her. So you've got all that stuff, and the PL Kanes form a kind of a locational trilogy. So you've got like Red Market, which is like a lot of northern towns put together, but market towns and things, a lot of places that I know that are very familiar to me, all thrown into a blender. Then you've got Golden Sands, which is like the places I used to go when I was a kid visiting, and where we did Chillicothe a couple of years ago, Scarborough, places like that, on the coast, yeah. Blackpool, wherever, lots of those kind of places where something, nasty happens. And in fact, that's got a psychologist in it who's investigating. I had to do a lot of research into serial killers and stuff and psychology and the things behind it. But The Family Lie is like probably the most horror-y crime thing. It's been described as Agatha Christie meets the Wicker Man. So it's you can't get much more of a sort of blend than that of crime and horror, can you? So I mean, things like Midsummer, I love things like that. So to get the chance to write about this cult that's out of nowhere, that all this stuff's going on, and this ex-copper Mitch has to go back and investigate what happened to his father. It's very much like their Wicker Man vibes to that one, even though it's a crime. And indeed, Wicker Man itself, it's a horror, but it's also, there's nothing supernatural as such happening in that. It's just a bunch of people that worship, the going back to like the pagan stuff and all the rest of it, and they kill a policeman. Not to spoil the ending. If you're listening to this, if you're listening to this, you're
probably not spoilers for that one.
I think that ship's sailed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you listen to this, you're probably a horror fan. So there is a kind of overlap, I think. And if you are a plotter like me, then kind of crime's not. It's not too much of a segue, really. It's especially if you're writing procedural stuff or whatever, there is a kind of an overlap there. Yeah, that's not too far off the the crime stuff and the horror stuff or the supernatural stuff, really.
I mean, you've mentioned Marie several times. You work with your partner Marie O'Regan on several occasions. How does that collaborative process differ for you than a solo project? Does the working relationship ever see you butt heads on what wouldn't or would work, or would you say you're pretty simpatico on your tastes in that?
Well, first of all, Marie's the best. I can't praise her highly enough. She's just fantastic. She's a fantastic writer, editor. I mean, her Absinthe stuff is starting to win awards now. Priya won a World Fantasy Award last year. People are starting to win stuff that she's edited, so that's really nice. But the editing process, I mean, we kind of just see eye to eye on that, really. I mean, we kind of go backwards and forwards with the edit. Like I might look at it, then Marie looks at it, then it might come back again, and we might talk about certain things when we're editing an anthology together. And we've both got different skill sets and different approaches, but when you put that together, it just works. It just kind of like works. Writing wise is a different matter. we did try to write a script once, very early doors, when we got to know each other, and we were both coming at it from two different angles, not sort of butting heads or anything, but it was just like I was thinking of one thing, she was thinking of another, and we both wanted to write it in completely different ways. So we just went, we'll just abandon that. So we did. That didn't work, because I think we're both deep down. I think we're both kind of control freaks about stuff like that. So it's very hard to work on a kind of even an outline. It's hard to work because Marie might want to take a character and expand that character, where I might look at it and go, I think that character's more interesting. I'd really love to do, like, make that the main character maybe. Or so writing wise, we kind of come at things from different angles, but the editing just works. It's just, I mean, we've done so many together now, and they've done really well. I mean, Cursed, the first Cursed was, you know, it's just selling, you know, in different current countries, different territories. It's just been translated into, you know, there's a Czech version of it now, on audio versions and things. It's just, they seem to work. The anthologies just work, you know. Touch wood, they carry on working. But we just handed in a folk horror one. We're doing the crime one at the moment, like I say, because we are just fans of all this stuff. We love getting first books by first time writers, whether it's a horror book or a crime book or supernatural or sci-fi. I mean, we went to the Ghost Story Festival last year, which is coming up again in Derby this month, and we were guests last year, and we did some stuff at that, and just meeting some of those people that wrote ghost stories and supernatural stuff and supernatural novels. And I said this to Alex at the time, I'm in awe of people who can write a novel of this, because I've only really done short stories, in, you know, supernatural short stories. Maybe one day I'll write a supernatural novel or something, but I'm in awe of, you know, and there were a lot of kind of first people who were just doing it for the first time that were at that, and I love all that. I love kind of like seeing new people come up and you know, picking up a new book by the first book by a new writer and just reading it and just like finding a new favorite. I'm going to look out for that second book now. I love kind of like finding writers that I'm going to probably be reading for years to come. It's quite something to be able to do that for people, because we had it done for us when we were first starting out in like small presses and things. People used our work, so it's kind of like paying it forward, I suppose, in a way. But it's really exciting when you find somebody and you think everybody has to start somewhere. Everybody has to start with early on in their career, don't they? So it's you know, your Clives and your James Herberts and whoever it is, Stephen King's. You know, everybody starts somewhere.
I mean, you've worked with some you know, what people consider big names over the years with the anthology work. I mean, is there anyone that you haven't worked with yet that you really like to?
I was thinking about this the other day, but not really. I mean, most of the fiction writers, I think we've worked with pretty much everybody I would like to work with who is on that kind of level, who's do like mega sort of like famous or what have you. I would have liked to done more with Ray Bradbury. A lot of them have passed away now. Is the shame of it, you know. But I mean, Brian Lumley, just this month, you know, it's a very, very sad. I only met Brian like a couple of times, but he would have been somebody I'd love to have done something with. But I mean, we did reprint a Ray Bradbury in Carnival of Horror from PS. But I mean, mainly people like I did get offered the opportunity to go and interview and sort of spend a bit of time with H.R. Giger, and I'm really sad that I didn't do that. Now I got invited over there to kind of see the museum and everything, and I was pretty broke at the time, so I couldn't afford to do it. You know, I would have got an article out of it, you know, if I'd come home and an interview out of it and sold those when I came back, but I didn't have enough money to get over there and to meet him. But I'm quite sad about. We almost got the opportunity to meet Stan Winston. That would have been the ultimate for me as well, because special effects and, you know, before he passed away. But I think these days it's kind of like directors and actors and people involved in those lines of work really that I've not worked with. Obviously, like directors like Ridley Scott, David Lynch, and people like that. I mean, I probably never will get to work with. But for somebody like Issa Lopez, who's doing True Detective at the moment, I mean, you know, people like that, it would be lovely to work with more people like that. I don't know if I ever will or not, but you know, you put that out into the universe, so you know, maybe something will happen down the line. Because a lot of the things that end up getting made of mine or end up getting adapted have been people who've come to me and said, have you got, I don't know, like Sacrifice was, have you got a folk horror? You know, it's like, yeah. So you know, these things, you you know, if you work hard enough and you put enough stuff out there and you go to conventions and you meet people, you never know who you're going to meet. You know, these things that happen in inverted commas by accident, you know, is down to usually you've met somebody at something, or you bought them a drink, or you've had a chat with them and they're on the same wavelength or whatever.
Well, you just mentioned sacrifice. I was just about to say, you've had several of your works adapted to the screen. What do you think makes a good adaptation? And do you have a particular favourite out of the ones that's been adapted from your book?
Well, that's like asking you to. It's like, what is your favourite book? It's like trying to choose between your children. It's you know, it's like I honestly love all of the things that have been adapted, and I'm not just saying that. I used to get, when I was really young and things, I was lucky enough to get things adapted, and people went away and did things with it that weren't the story that I wrote. I'd get a bit bent out of shape about it because it wasn't my story. But the longer I go on, the more you can see, the more I love the aspect of like what they saw in your story originally, and then they did something else with it, or they pulled on a certain thing that you wouldn't have thought of doing. Like Sacrifice, for instance, was a folk horror thing that was inspired by going around teaching out in the community in these little wayward places, and I saw these kind of scarecrows in the gardens, and I just thought, well, that's a great, you know, jumping off point for something. So I came up with this community that like worshipped the you know, ram's head and the kind of like the textiles stuff and all the rest of it, and they built these scarecrows and they would put people inside these scarecrows, a bit like the kind of, you know, League of Gentlemen type of thing. So which then ended up being a Lovecraftian thing with Barbara Crampton in Norway. so you know, but I can still see. I mean, I love that film. I love Sacrifice. I think they did a fantastic job. You know, Andy Collier and Tor Meyer, I think they did a great job with the script and with making it. And it's not my story, but it is, if that makes sense, because you can see how it is my story, but it's changed a lot, but it's something very, very different and something unusual, something like separate from the story now. So it's like almost like having two things have come from that one idea. So I really like putting things into different, like doing the Torturer play, you know, like doing the kind of, actually it was for Hideout, it was One for the Road, and I did send them the Torturer script to have a look at, but it has been turned into like a 1 hour, 2 1 hour things, like One for the Road and the Torturer, which is why I'm thinking along those lines for like an evening's kind of theatre. And I love to see things being adapted in different, because it makes you think in different ways. It makes you come at things from other angles. Like, how could we do the Torturer on stage? How could you do, I don't know, whatever it is, a short story of mine. I mean, I adapted Shells, which is like a seaside horror thing, into a feature last year, or the end of 22, it might have been, which is something down the line that's hopefully going to happen. And I had to take a short story that was 7,000 words and like bump it up into a feature film, which is like hour and 40, hour and 50. And you have to add characters to it, and you have to like obviously do a lot of work to it just to get like a feature from that short story. But you can do it, you know. It's a lot of work to it, but and I suppose if you're holding a gun to my head, I prefer the ones that I've adapted myself, because you know that you're adapting your work into something that is still going to be your work at the end of the day. But I do love seeing what other people have done with, you know, I mentioned Joe Manco with the Torturer. You know, he did a fantastic job. He elevated that script. You know, everybody on that production did. Catalina, you know, everybody just worked. You know, Lawrence and Paul, and it created something that I wouldn't have been able to create myself, if that makes sense. I love seeing adaptations. You know, I love to see what other people have done with the source material, you know. In The Weeping Woman, The Opportunity, which was Lewis Copson, and Claire Coleman, who was a student of mine at the time. We got this the serial killer thing, this stalker thing through the streets of Matlock. We filmed that late at night in black and white. I love. There's hardly any money these things, for these short films, to make them. But they just, something really special comes out of it, I think.
You mentioned Shell. Have you got any other adaptations coming up that you can talk about at least? Or
there are always things that are like optioned and slowly kind of inching towards being made. I mean, Red's just been optioned again, the werewolf one. But again, that's the script for that, which has won awards at various things, is a very different thing to the werewolf thing that I did. And Michael Miller, who I mentioned earlier on, who tagged me in the 15 films thing, he's optioned The Between, which is basically a novelette I wrote years and years ago. And it's this lift gets stuck between floors, and everything's black around it, but these monsters keep picking off various characters from the lift. So it's been described as Devil meets Jaws. So it's all these kind of things that are sort of out there and inching towards like getting made. When they do, it's fun. When something gets off and running, it's always wonderful. And there are things I can't obviously talk about either, but just various things. And there are things that kind of you think are going to get off the ground and then just fall at the final hurdle. Just never go anywhere. But the more irons you got in the fire, the more chance of getting something made, or getting it further down the line, or getting funding for it, or whatever it is. So all these things are very interesting. You find out how the processes work, and you're kind of going behind the curtain with the Wizard of Oz to see how it all kind of gets made. Because sitting in a mining town watching these things when I was a kid, I didn't know how anybody filmed anything. I didn't even know anybody did film anything. As far as I was concerned, it appeared on this little box in the corner of the room, and it's like, this is great. But how much hard work goes into that is like, it's an eye opener.
Yeah. Is there anything that you give your arm a leg to do, kind of like a dream project, as it were?
Again, there are loads of things. There's something that there was a dream project, and it almost got to the last hurdle, but you don't really want to talk about it in case it does get resurrected at some point. And it's like something that would have been like one of my ticket off the bucket list kind of thing, things like you'd love to write a Doctor Who, or you'd love to do I don't know, just to write an indie horror movie or a supernatural movie that just took off and people loved, like Blair Witch, or make something like that just became, everybody loved it. Yeah, always doing lots of different things. There are dream projects. But I'd love to write a James Bond. Who wouldn't? I'd love to either be involved in writing a James Bond film, or do a James Bond novel or something. Because I've been a Bond fan for years and years. There are kind of franchises I'd love to work. Star Wars. There's lots of things that I'd love to do some work in. I'm lucky that the ones that I have kind of worked in, I've been able to. They've either been legends, like fairy tales, like the Robin Hood stuff. Is basically, I see Robin Hood as being one of the first sort of almost like superheroes. So I could do him as almost like drawing his energy from Sherwood Forest, and but I didn't have to kind of get anybody's permission to do that, because he's out there, Robin Hood. So, but things that you can do stuff with mythology wise that you wouldn't need permission to do. But obviously there are franchises that I love, and I'd love to be involved in. Just again, it's how long is a piece of string. There's so many.
Bearing in mind, I think this is going to go out around June time, at the start of June. So. Okay. Is there? What are you working? Can you say anything about anything you're working on at the moment?
Over the summer kind of thing. Well, the folk horror is coming out in August. That's up for pre-order now. Beyond and Within folk horror, that's from Flame Tree. So look out for that over the summer. Obviously, the crime anthology we're putting together now, that's coming out in October. And the paperback of In These Hallowed Halls is out, I think, in September. So that was the Dark Academia thing we did last year. That was so much fun. And I didn't know too much about Dark Academia until I came to that one. And Titan asked us to do it, and it was like, I don't know much about it, but I went away and read, people, obviously some of the huger names in there like ML Rio and Olivia Blake, and you go away and read this stuff and you just go, this is how come I've not come across this before? Obviously, a lot of people have come across it, but I'd never come across it personally. So it's like some of the people that I was finding out for the first time and reading their short stories for the first time, and it was quite a privilege to do that, because there were people online going, I need to see this right now. And it was like a year before the book was coming out. So it's like, I'm very lucky to be reading it on my computer screen. So it's like, what else is going on? We've got a scripting book coming up, which is like all my short scripts that I've written that have been turned into things. So if you're kind of a film fan, it'll be the short story and then the script of it with some behind the scenes pictures and things. So lots of things. And we were talking about reprinting one of my novels that's just gone out of print. So I'm talking to a publisher at the moment to do a new version of that. And also the same publisher. Oh no, it's a different publisher. Sorry, I've gone back, and there was this whole novel that I wrote back in the mid-90s. Back when I was just messing about and just kind of finding my feet, but it's the closest thing really to a kind of paperbacks from hell that I've ever written. I started reading it just one day and I thought, oh, I never did anything with this. I went on to Gemini after that and doing short stories, and I thought I'll just have a little read at this, and I started reading it, and then I started reading chapter 1 and then chapter 2. I read the prologue and then just carried on reading it and thought, actually, this isn't horrendous. So if I put this out as like my first, novel length thing that I ever wrote, maybe people might, it's a curiosity. I mean, you can definitely see other things from my work later on that I've kind of cannibalized from it. Like there are bits from Sleepers, which was like my it seems horrible talking about it now, but it was almost like a pandemic version of what would happen with Sleeping Beauty. It was like people fall asleep one day, a bit like Midwich Cuckoos, and you can see elements of that in this novel. You can see elements of all kinds of things. The torturer is in there. You've got various characters. There are scenes from certain novels. If people have read my other books, they'd recognise as being like, oh God, that's a bit like that from Gemini or whatever. But it's okay. It's not. I mean, I would put it out there with the caveat that he's very much like a fledgling writer trying to find his feet. But it's interesting to look at it and then look at what I've done since and go, well, that was him trying to kind of like find his voice, I suppose.
Well, I've got to ask you this. I mean, it's something we always ask our first-time guests on the show. You're going to hate me for this. You did mention some of the things that you like to watch, but I'm going to try and pin you down. If you
pin me down.
If you had to choose just one, a cult movie, just one of any genre, Desert Island disc, as it were. I mean, for those out there like me who are still into physical media anyway, what would be your go-to choice and why?
A cult movie. Well, can it be like a Hollywood blockbuster, or does it have to be like an indie kind of cult movie?
As I say, a couple of months back we looked at Ghostbusters, which is it's both a blockbuster and it has a big cult following. So as long as it's something like that.
Well, I'll say one that I've never kind of mentioned before that I absolutely love. And I love John Carpenter's work, obviously. I mean, in those 15 films, The Thing is going to be in there because that's like, the ultimate. But I would say Escape from New York, because I just love the character of Snake Plissken. He's just like, he doesn't give a toss about anything. It's like, I mean, in the second one, he switches the world off. I just love that character. I just think he's just going through that film and does not give a toss about. I mean, he's trying not to die, obviously in New York, but he's also trying not to. His heart rate, is it his heart rate, or I can't remember. He's got a bomb inside him, hasn't he, or something in the first one?
Yeah.
And he's trying to do it in time, so he doesn't die. But everything else is just like fair game, isn't it? To him, it's like just send that guy in, he'll get the job done.
I have to admit, I do love those films, so I can understand why you picked them. Weirdly enough, though, we've never looked at them on the show. We've done a few John Carpenters. We've done The Thing,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you know, I guess. We've done Big Trouble, and at the start of this season, we did They Live. But
Oh,
yeah,
great film.
we've got to do Escape from New York, so I might end
Yeah.
up trying to get back on the show at that point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was trying to go for something that wouldn't be an obvious kind of like choice for me. Like horror, it's not really horror. It's not really. I mean, I love sci-fi. I love dystopian stuff. You know, so I think I'll say that because it is one of my favorite films. And James Cameron worked on that film. Obviously, a lot of people know that's how he was starting out doing like the matte paintings and things and all the rest of it, wasn't he, for Escape from New York? So, you know, that kind of spun off into things like the Terminator. So, you know, that which will be another choice. Terminator franchise. I mean, anything by James Cameron, really. But yeah. I mean, you know, I'll go for that one because I do love that character. I do love the film, but I love that character of Snake Plissken because he just represents he's a guy. He's somebody who does the things that you would like to do, but you don't have the kind of balls to do.
Get away with
it. You know, so I'll go for that. I'll go for that. Kurt Russell is a god, you know, and so is John Carpenter. So
nice one.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, man. I appreciate you answering the question. So hopefully it allows
no worries at all.
You know, to get more of a glimpse into Kane the author. You know, do you read Kane? Sorry, I had to make that joke.
Yes, yeah, I've heard
I'm
that
sure
before,
it's not the first time.
No, it's not, but you know, it is funny.
Maybe there'll be some out there that, you know, they'll have now discovered some of your work that they might want to check out. So I'll give we'll throw some links out later for anybody that wants to check it out. So
definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm on all social media things. You can find me everywhere. I'm on Twitter that is now X, you know, Facebook. Although I think I've only got a few friends things left now on Facebook, but Instagram, Mastodon, Blue Sky I'm on. So, you know, just come and find me. I'm happy to I mean, we do the Saturday night chillers as well, and people comment on those. That comes from my childhood as well. It was like watching a horror film on a Saturday night with my mum and dad. We'd watch like the Fog or something like that. And now Marie and I watch a horror film on a Saturday night. So,
nice.
You know, and people comment on that. So it's, come and heckle us.
Well, I mean, we'll get into today's movie, which is you know, is of course Hellraiser, 1987 British supernatural horror film / love story, written and theatrical directorial debut of Barker, produced by Christopher Figg, based on Barker's novella The Hellbound Heart, and debuted at the Prince Charles Cinema on 10th of September 87. It was released in Croatia as Lords of Hell, in India as Son of the Devil, in Mexico as Door to Hell, in France as The Pact, in Portugal as Fire, Serbia as Lords of Hell, and my favorite is the Taiwanese. In Taiwan, it was Raise Ghosts and Eat People. So, I do love that. On release, it divided critics, with many praising it as one of the greatest horror movies ever made, while others called it, and if you know the critic, you'll probably understand why, imaginatively bankrupt and populated by singularly uninteresting actors. Nevertheless, it was labelled a success, taking in $20 million on a modest budget of just one, and has gone on to spawn numerous sequels, reboots, merchandise, and acquiring an extremely loyal cult fan base. And as with all of our films discussed so far, it's available on various streaming platforms depending on territory, as well as DVD and Blu-ray for those of you sensible people who still buy physical media. Now, I've got to say, I came to this one gradually. Like you, I didn't see it in the cinema. I was too young.
Yeah.
My first experience was a friend. He collected soundtracks and he played the Christopher Young soundtrack vinyl for me.
Yeah, fantastic.
And that together with images from, I believe it was Fangoria, and looking at it back then, I was young. I couldn't believe the look of this thing.
Yeah.
But it kind of came and went in our local cinema, which only has 2 screens at the time. it never showed it. So I ended up coming to it because I saw Hellbound first.
Right.
It had that little prequel at the start, but I still
Mm.
didn't have much of an idea as to what were going on and who the characters were. But I just fell in love with it. I think the look of Hellbound just dragged me in, and yeah. So then I went back and watched Hellraiser, and I loved it. So I mean, I think of this one and Hellbound as one combined story, as it were.
Yeah.
Though, obviously, we're only covering the first. So, yeah, can you remember the very first time you saw this? I mean, you mentioned that I think it was on video, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I had to borrow it from a friend's brother because I mean we had one screen, so we were so out of the way. We had like one cinema screen, and it was probably showing some Disney film at the time.
Yeah,
and I couldn't get in anyway because I wasn't old enough, so I had to wait for that to kind of come out on video. And I used to kind of look at it longingly in video shops with like the pinhead face, and I wish I could. So I borrowed it from a friend's brother, I think it was, and I think I watched it on my own the first time, and absolutely it scared me witless. And I wasn't very old, but I just watched it and I just thought, wow, and then after I kind of like, came down from the ceiling, I watched it again, and it was just like, this is, as you say, there'd never been anything like it. It was just not anything that I'd seen before. And me and my dad used to watch like the video nasties together because we, got into watching horrors and all kinds of things. We watched all sorts of horrors, and I loved things like zombie flesh eaters, the Fulci stuff, and all the rest of it. And this I just watched this, and I just thought I was blown away. It was just like, I've never seen anything like this, And I think that moment, again, it's like that one of those moments in your life where you see something and you just think, this has changed my life. It's not too, it sounds quite grandiose or quite a bit, but it did literally change my life. It was, and it has done with, in my career. But it was just something that got me at the right time. And I think if you can scare people, but you can also tell a good story, and you've got good characters, and like I say, everybody in that film knocks it out of the park. I mean, Ashley just goes for it in that. I remember interviewing her once, and she said that T-shirt could, get up and walk on its own by the time she'd finished with it, because it was all kind of like just drenched in this stuff. And Claire is just amazing. I'll never forget meeting Claire for the first time at a convention, and she was just telling us all this stuff, and she's such a lovely. Such a lovely person. You just think, that and Julia, and just like Andy Robinson, and Sean Chapman. Just I mean, Oliver Smith. People don't, Oliver Smith in the Frank suit. Wow, just amazing. Obviously, the Cenobites as well have gone on to like become. Good friends of mine, their performances as well, and just talking to them with their method in doing it over the years, because they don't really have that much screen time in the first one. People forget that they don't, appear that much really. I
was looking at it. They don't appear until I think after the first hour of the movie, and even then they're not prevalent for a lot of it. They really just make an impact.
They're in that little tiny sequence with Frank right at the very beginning where he solves the box, and then Pinhead appears and everything, and then you've got like his face is in bits and the chains and stuff, and then it's gone. Everything's gone, which again is genius. I mean, that's off to Clive. It's like you present that. It's like the guy's bought this box, he's gone somewhere, he solved it, then all this crazy stuff's happening, then it's gone like that, just like that. And it's like, what the hell is going on?
It establishes so much in that one scene, where Pinhead turns the box back, and as you say, everything's gone. So it immediately sets it up that you think, okay, I'm kind of knowing where this is going.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't, but it's it establishes so much in such a small amount of time, and I love that. And you mentioned that you've met Claire. Is this right?
Yeah.
I read that she actually hates horror movies and she's never seen the whole thing.
I don't know. I didn't ask her that. First time I met her, she was just coming off the Golden Compass, I think it was. That was the film version, so that was shows you how long ago it was. And we just talked about the making of the film, really, and how certain she talked about how, I mean, this is all in the Hellraiser's book. It's an ebook. It didn't come out as a print book, unfortunately, in the end. But all the interviews that I did with people back then are all in the Hellraiser's book. And she talks about how these guys would write to her, and obviously kind of attracted to Julia. And she said, which I thought was very brave of them, because I could just get my little hammer out and just whack them on the head.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. That's just we were just wetting ourselves laughing. But it's true. I mean, it's that the bit at the beginning does something that I used to kind of bring up in writing classes, which is throw the guy out of the plane at the very beginning, and then backtrack and show how he got in the plane, the rabbit's foot in Mission Impossible. You work backwards, and that's exactly what that does. It's like he's bought something, all hell is kicked off literally. You don't know it's hell. Well, obviously you do because you're watching Hellraiser, but and then you have to wait to find out how he got to that situation and what it was all about and what's happened to him since he's been gone. And you don't even really know for sure that's Frank that's come back in that. It could be anybody. I mean, just that blood has brought something back, but you don't know for sure it's Frank really until he starts talking to Julia, and it's I mean, you've just got the heart, haven't you, under the Edgar Allan Poe heart beating under the floorboards and everything, and it's just to kind of have to wait that long to find out, and it's just teased out.
It is.
It's brilliant.
I think that, I mean, it obviously directed a few shorts before, but to say this is his theatrical debut, it's the word masterclass is overused these days. I honestly think it is. To say this was his first theatrical movie, and I think the writing and the direction are just impeccable.
Yeah, well, the script's amazing as well, and I mean, I'm sure Clive would acknowledge all the people that worked on that the same as I did with the audio thing. But I mean, people like Bob Kane with the special effects were just fantastic. I mean, we went to see Bob at Pinewood and chatted to him in his it was a little kind of like porter cabin thing that he had with the dog soldier werewolf as you walked in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then we met him again at a convention a few years later. But the effects that and Jeff Portas and people like that, just the effects were fantastic. The kind of dripping grew off Frank.
It turns even no matter how many times I've seen it, it still turns my stomach in some section.
Yeah, and the look of the Cenobites as well. Jane Wildgoose with the costumes. It's just again a lot of things coming together to create this thing that is. I don't think it's putting it too lightly that it's going to be like. People are going to be coming back to it in centuries to come. I'm sure. If there's still a planet there around, but just something that's going to endure is probably the best way of saying it. But just like lightning in a bottle, really. Kept everybody coming together, and I do love the fact it's things like that are a team effort. And everybody that I've spoken to that's worked on these films it's a family. It's just a family. They're also lovely. The people have just the camaraderie between them all as well. It's just, it's just fantastic. It's, in the writing community and in like film and TV and the Hellraiser community, the fans are fantastic as well. I've met a lot of the fans over the years by being involved in that, and they're just, so knowledgeable, and they knew things that I didn't know, and I would go to these people and say, have you got any photographs that people might not have seen? Or, I mean, Steve Jones is an obvious example of that. Steve lent me a lot of photographs to use in Legacy, and he's got kind of like, he was the unit publicist on the first films, and he's got like boxes of these things that I'm sure he's still kind of got things that people haven't seen. In fact, I think some of the stuff is going to end up in the Phantasmagoria magazine. It's going to be a hardback, I think, actually, I was told. So yeah, I mean, people are just so helpful, and so, you know, it is kind of like a little family in the Hellraiser family within the horror community family, if that makes sense, you know.
Hopefully, it's not as dysfunctional as the family in the movie.
No. Well, I mean, all families have their problems, don't they? So,
yeah, but there are problems, and then there's this family.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously to the extreme, but there are like people fall out in families. People, you know, there's stuff going on in that is kind of kitchen sink, new wave British cinema kind of drama. You know, it's stuff that it wouldn't look out of place in like EastEnders or something. You know, there are things going on in that world, like, you know, obviously a wife who's not satisfied, and you know, they're like chalk and cheese. You know, Larry and Julia. It's all kind of there. It's just relationships, and you know,
that's one of the things I wanted to pick your brains about with regards to Larry and Julia.
Yeah.
It could be in the novel. Maybe I've just forgotten. And if those of you out there who've read the novel and are lambasting me now for having a really bad memory, but Julia obviously doesn't love Larry, and he's not got much money. So why is she sticking around? You do get this sense of loyalty towards the end, where she's trying to convince Frank she's not going to kill him. But why is she staying with Larry?
Well, I think, I don't know. It's been a while since I've read the novella, but I got the sense that she did love him, and she did kind of like, it's that sort of thing. People fall into relationships and they possibly think it's love, or it's something that they want, you know, at the beginning of a relationship, and then obviously the longer things go on, you realize that it's not that thing that you want. You know, I think that's sort of starting to happen almost when Frank turns up at the door, and obviously she's never encountered anybody like Frank before, and it's like, this is new, this is exciting, this is, you know, he's a little bit, as they used to say in the fascia, a little bit way, a little bit woo. and it's kind of like just turns ahead, and then it's basically what she'll do anything for him, and that is kind of like, I don't know if it's like love, but it's lust. It's kind of like just craving that person, and I think that's what's the interesting dynamic is about that. Those three, I do think she actually does care about Larry or Rory in the Hellbound Heart novella. I think she does care about him until she experiences something that she never knew she wanted in the first place. I think that's what happens. I think it's like, hold on a minute, you know, he doesn't make me feel like that, Larry. You know? And then from that moment,
poor Larry.
Yeah, poor Larry. I mean, there's no harm in Larry. I mean, there's nothing kind of wrong with Larry. I mean, he's just your everyman. He's like just somebody who's a bit kind of, you know, I write about this in Legacy. He's just somebody who like lives vicariously through watching the boxing, or, you know, it's just kind of like just a bit of just not a drip, but, you know, do you know what I mean? It's kind of,
yeah. But there are hints sometimes that Larry, if just given just a bit of a push, would be as bad as Frank. It's possible. I don't know if it's something that I picked up on with Andrew Robinson's acting, but there are certain times where, you know, the character kind of creeps me out almost as much as Frank sometimes. When Julia's in the bathroom, he's saying, "Do you want to cook your little girl?"
And but is that because it's Andy Robinson playing both roles? I don't know. I mean, but firstly, how amazing is that performance? Because to do two different to do Larry convincingly and then do Frank convincingly, it's the same as Tom Meaton in the audio. It's like to switch into like, you know, and play those two characters that are two ends of the scale. And I think, I don't know, I think Larry's kind of, they're brothers, so you obviously get the sense that something, you know, there was always kind of a one-upmanship with that in that relationship. Like, you know, I can do, he was always kind of trying to chase Frank's coattails, I think, and he went off and explored the big wide world, whereas, Larry just got a job and, had responsibilities and maybe wanted to go out into the wider world, but wasn't brave enough or something. And I think, there's obviously that dynamic going on where that something could have possibly pushed him over the edge, but he's got a moral compass. So I don't think, he's Frank with a moral compass, I think. But Frank is just like Snake Plissken. He's like, I'm just doing it, whatever.
Do you know? I had no idea until doing the research for this that he was dubbed. That Sean Chapman was dubbed in this.
Yeah, the American thing again, isn't it? It's kind of like to make him sort of bring it in more in line with, I suppose they could dub both characters, when he's got the skin and when he hasn't got the skin. So it's again, it's that weird thing of like trying to make it accessible, I suppose, because they've got American money and trying to make it accessible to both audiences, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
it ends up being a kind of like this weird hinterland, doesn't it? It's neither American nor
it is
kind of British.
It's very strange. I mean, it's obviously in the UK because you see the old British Rail siding on the delivery as the train as it flies past, and which is, and I do have to call out that it's one of my favourite scenes. It's only a small scene, but it captures the mood of the piece completely. The scene where Kirsty's walking on the docks.
Oh yeah.
That strikes me every time. Christopher Young's music
Chris
together
Young
with that.
music. Yeah, again, Chris Young. That music as well elevates the whole thing. As I'm sure everybody involved would agree with that. That music just makes it, the balleretic, kind of like everything's, the theme tune as well. My goodness, but I think, I mean, Pete Atkins, who I got to know, lovely bloke, over the years through this. He talks about this American UK thing as being like its own universe almost. So it's kind of like the Hellraiser world is its own thing, in this universe, and it's got bits of American, it's got bits of UK. I mean, the explanation is they had money from both sides, so that's they did that and they meshed it together. But it does create this kind of weird, like alternate universe that this stuff is going on in, and it does. I mean, there's something to that. I think
it does.
When Pete talks about it.
A kind of, I'm not going to say dreamlike, but it is a very surreal atmosphere that pervades the whole thing. And I'm wondering if it kind of works in its favour.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. And the little touches that unless you watch it many, many times, the little things like, obviously the nod to Dario Argento in the dream sequence with Kirsty, and then it's not her that wakes up. It's Steve who's having the dream. It's kind of just a weird kind of thing they're sharing, this dream almost. It's like very strange, that you'd expect her to wake up in this sweat in a panic, and it's him that wakes up. It's like, it's very, very odd, just like stuff that keeps you on your toes and just kind of wrong foots you. Little touches here and there that are thrown in, but I do think it does work in its favour. The whole kind of it's its own thing. It's that kind of weird collision of these, like I love the surrealists. I love like Darley and Magritte and that, and it's that weird kind of juxtaposition of these two things. That.
There's also that element as well. I find that, I don't know if you get this, but when I finish watching it, it's almost like I need to take a shower, simply because you're watching this thing in this house, and it is very intimate. It's a very quiet setting. There's no, running around a camp slaughtering teenagers and stuff. It's just, you're watching a family's secrets play out, and I feel all perverse, like a voyeur.
Maybe it's just the T-shirt again that Ashley talked about. You just look, everything's just so grubby by the end, isn't it? And so kind of sweaty and grubby that you just feel like you need to take a shower. I don't know, maybe that's it.
You've led me in a kind of weird segue into this other section. I do not like that house, even before the movie. And he says, "Well, I suppose it's better than how bad is Brooklyn at this point?"
Yeah,
you know.
Although they don't know from the outside, to be fair. They don't know what's going on the inside of that. I mean, from the outside, it's a really nice house. When I first got to know Marie, she took me there. And to the outside, and I was like, there's a photo of me grinning like a Cheshire cat outside this house because it's the Hellraiser house behind me. And I'm like, wow. And I think, I think I probably knew then that Marie was was a woman for me because she'd taken me to the Hellraiser house. So,
were you like looking at her to make sure she wasn't carrying a hammer?
Got a hammer, yeah. No, I was lucky she liked me. So, I mean, if anybody else had come near, she might have whacked him with a hammer. But yeah, but yeah, I mean, from the outside, it's a lovely house. I mean, it's all, when I went there, and this is going back like 20 years, it was all painted white, and in Dollis Hill, and people were always kind of going and getting photos took there. So I hear anyway. I mean, I'm not by any means advocating people do that, but it's kind of a landmark for horror fans in the same way that the Michael Myers Street and lots of the Exorcist steps and things.
Claire Higgins is very attractive, but I'm sorry, if someone took me back to that house, especially the attic, I don't care how horny I was, I would not be horny.
Those are some desperate men. That's all I can say. Because if somebody takes you up to the attic and he goes, "Where's the bed?" and she goes, let's just get down on the floorboards," that would be out so fast.
Yeah,
but they are a mixture of stupidity and desperate, I think, those men.
Yeah. Again, it does go back to the realism of it, because I do like the fact that he comes out with that line. He says, "You're not going to change you're kind of feeling sorry for him at first, and then
then you're not."
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
you're not. Then you kind
but
of.
Then when he gets to the attic, and he's kissing her and that kind of stuff, and he's taking his trousers off.
Yeah.
In no way in most films would you get someone stopping midway and said, I need to go and relieve the bladder.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that about this.
That's a very British thing, isn't it? That's a kind of very British moment, that one. But I mean, there's one of the victims who you do feel quite sorry for. He's obviously kind of a sad, desperate, sort of lonely guy right at the end, with the glasses, the kind of, the guy who goes, who's the last victim. I mean, that guy you're talking about, it's like, you're not going to change your mind. And then upstairs he's, I must empty the old bladder. And you think, just get your hammer and do it.
Yeah.
Just get on with it, Claire,
Take this guy out.
Yeah, he's kind of asking for it, isn't he?
Yeah. But, and I mean, again, we've mentioned the acting, but I do think Claire Higgins is fantastic in this.
Oh, totally, yeah.
The way she changes, and there's some iconic shots now of that after that first victim, and there's blood spatter on her face, but she takes some of the lines, and you would imagine it with a lesser actor, they wouldn't be portrayed half as well. I mean, even that little scene where Larry is watching the boxing, and he says, "I thought you didn't like this kind of thing," and she says, "I've seen worse." The delivery is just spot on.
I've seen worse. Yeah. She's Lady Macbeth. I mean, Claire's got the chops. She's got the chops for it. It's like she's like one of the best actors you'll ever see. I mean, it's she's got the chops to. She's playing Lady Macbeth there basically, and it does come across as it's very Shakespearean, isn't it? It's kind of you feel like you're watching a performance on, and it does feel like, and again, this comes a bit from Clive's background in the the dog company and the theatre stuff. You do almost feel like you're watching a play, because they're kind of like, it's very claustrophobic. Some of it's in one setting, and even like on the stairs, they're positioned in a kind of way that you'd imagine like a theatre director positioning people, you know, in this one kind of setting. And they did
Yeah.
try. They did try to turn it into a play. I think it was in the 90s, and it was going to be this really expensive play. Simon Bamford will tell you all about that. He knows all about it. But they were going to have like levels that came out on hydraulics and things. And I think Pete was writing it, and Doug was going to be involved in it. And you know, it does work as a play. You know, it is a very kind of claustrophobic, intimate setting, and it was that stuff was all filmed in that house. And they used to paint on the walls and draw on the walls. Ashley and Clive would paint on the walls. So you know, it was a very kind of like summer camp feel to it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did find a quote once. I'm not just taking the 12 most beautiful youths in California and murdering them. I've got real actors, real performers, and then I'm murdering them.
Yeah, totally, Clive. Yeah. I love that. I've not heard that one actually. I haven't heard that one. Yeah,
as you say, I think it was a team effort because Barker himself said, you know, that. With his own lack of knowledge, and he says he didn't know the difference between a 10mm lens and a 35. And if you'd have showed him a plate of spaghetti and said it was a lens, he would have believed you.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, learning on the kind of like on the hoof, really, wasn't he? He was kind of like, you know, getting, you know, like learning it all as he went along, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you know, because they're very different. You know, feature films very different to making a short. And those black and white films as well, the short films and stuff, were made over kind of a period of time as well. So like you'd shoot a bit in a garage, or you shoot a bit somewhere, you know, somebody's backyard or whatever it was, and little bits of kind of like the peeling of the skin in one of the films. Pete talks about that because it's kind of paint. They paint him and then they'd let it dry and then just peel that off. So that was like very basic kind of effects, but it works in black and white, you know, it kind of works in black and white. And obviously doing a feature film is so much, you know, so different to doing the short film. So you kind of like learning everything as you go along. But yeah, I mean, to say that's your first film, my God, anybody would be, you know, you get down on your hands and knees, wouldn't you, and just be
definitely.
Like, you know.
As you mentioned earlier, I think because it's a team effort and everybody kind of pulled the weight, it came out with, as you say, lightning in a bottle. Yeah, and I mean, even down to the sound design, and I mean, the sound is fantastic. But even now, I can be sat somewhere and hear someone sucking at the bottom of a milkshake, and it reminds me of Frank. You know, that sound, it's just so repugnant to me that it's left an impression.
Or you can be somewhere, or you know, like with a church nearby or a chapel, and you just see that ding. You just go, hold on a minute. Who's opened the box? Who's opened that box? Yeah, because you're kind of conditioned to it, especially if you've watched it a lot of times. You know, if it's been with you a long time, then those kind of like just the sound design, as you say, is just, you know, it all just works. You know.
Yeah, I mean, even down to small things like when Julia first goes upstairs and there's the whispering, and she opens the attic door, the whispering just stops. There's something really evocative about that. I just think it's filled with these little touches, and that, you know, that just set you on edge. And that's before you get into, obviously there's a lot of I guess people would say gross out kind of effects, but none of them seem excessive in the way that he's trying to create gross out for gross out's sake. It all serves a purpose, if you know what I mean. And I think that's where they got really creative.
Well, I think Clive's always talked about this kind of like the you know, like beauty and grotesque things, you know, and the sort of like because nature is kind of horrific in its own, you know, its own way. There are things that are like, I mean, look at a Venus flytrap. It's, you know, a beautiful thing to look at, and then it traps these things and it just kind of digests. You know, I mean, there are horrific things to look at in nature, but they're quite beautiful as well at the same time. And I mean, Frank is just a human body with no skin on. it is horrible, but at the same time we're all walking about with those, so it's it is horrible, but you have to kind of think to yourself, well, actually that is kind of beautiful as well, and take your skin off, and that's what you've got underneath,
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's it's obviously in the second one where it's Julia's turn, and she's in the dress with the bandages, and she makes that comment on how surreal it looks. But it is when Frank stood there in the attic in the first one, in that suit, puffing away on a cigarette,
suit and tie, yeah. Just so weird. Such a kind of surreal image, isn't it? It's, I mean, no wonder I was attracted to like surreal moments in it, because that's just like, that's the bowler hat with the guy with the apple in front of his face. It's just like throw something weird into this situation, but let's have him have a suit on.
It's memorable. And
is.
even now people associate that image with this movie, and it's something that we hadn't seen before. I often say when I'm talking to friends that to me this is the movie that Fangoria was made for, because it's so creative and there's so many different elements. But I mean, the part where Frank's digging his fingers into that guy's neck, that makes me want to throw up. I'm sorry.
I mean, it's but again, it goes back to the Venus flytrap thing. It's like some, how some animals eat, or how some, a triffid or something like that. It's beautiful to look at these things, but they can be quite horrific as well. And all he's doing is trying to recreate himself. He's trying to survive, isn't he? So as horrible as it is, you can kind of understand it, even though he's not a very nice man. He's just trying to get back into the real world and get away from the Cenobites. So, would anybody do any different? I don't know. I mean, it's a moral argument, isn't it? Really,
it is.
If you're trying to get away from somebody, then.
Well, going back to getting away, that first shot where Frank comes dragging himself across the floor towards Julia.
Yeah,
that is, again, that's another one of the scenes that always stands out in my mind. I think it's horrific, but again, the makeup on him is really good. Like when later on you hear the Chris Young piano, and Frank smiles, and he's got that white kind of makeup on at that point before they start, and it's and
the thing with the eye where he just pops the eye at the end when he's got the skin on, and he just kind of goes and the eye. And I mean, she's obviously in a bit of a state of shock, Kirsty, but when she sees him and he's got all this blood around his hairline, and you just think that would make me pause, I think.
Yes.
That's not my dad, I don't think.
I have to ask, apparently it's got a bit of a slating in the years in between, but what do you think of regarding the transformation of the Guardian at the end?
I don't mind it. I mean, if you kind of like, I mean, if you grew up like I did with, like I say, Doctor Who and special effects and things done on the, I don't mind it. I mean, it's no worse than some of the stuff that's been in horror films in the 70s, and obviously you're on a limited budget, and I think it does. I mean, if you think about it, they do some really clever things. Like the house doesn't burn down; it kind of, you see a light in the house, and then you see a photograph burning, and then suddenly they're stood on this kind of like like a wasteland with bits of things burning all around them, and that's a really clever transition. And you just think, when you watch that as a kid, or you watch it in your teenage years, or you're not paying, you're not kind of like scrutinizing it frame by frame, you just think, oh, the house is burnt down. It's that kind of shorthand, those little tricks, and it never bothered me that the tramp falling into the fire and the skeletal dragon.
I'll be honest, it never really bothered. I like it as a someone that used to play D&D back in the day. It reminds me of that. And they're on a limited budget, but if I were going to diss everything that was on a limited budget, as you say, erasing, 40 years of Doctor Who in one fell
Yeah.
swoop. So,
But and again, it's something you've not seen before, is a skeletal dragon. A guy who drops into a fire and then becomes a skeletal dragon. I can't think of anything else that's,
no,
that does that.
it's certainly not been. And I love how that then fades into that beautiful bookend.
Oh yeah, with the box.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they kind of like zoom into or is it a zoom out? I can't remember now. But then you get the circular thing of going to. Well, it is literally circular, the round bit and on the box itself, and the circular thing of doing the next. So again, it's like this thing is going to carry on. It's not necessarily with Kirsty or with Julia, although it does in the next one. But it's going to carry on in lots of different ways, in lots of different forms, with lots of different people, which is where the epic thing comes in again, of all these kind of Twilight Zone, anthology type of things. You can go back to medieval times, you can go forwards into the future, you can do X, Y, and Z. And I love all that.
I was going to ask you, we've brought up the epic comics, but the legacy of this thing, as it's gone on, you've written about the sequels. Where do you stand on the sequels? Because I know a lot of people that just say after the third one they drop off, but I think there's a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got to be honest, I've not seen all of them. I think I've only seen up to Hellworld.
Yeah, no, I've seen them all. There's lots of interest, even in the ones that people classify as not being the best ones, but there are really interesting ideas, and you can see what people like Gary Tunnicliffe was trying to do in his films, because he always talks about it as like Frank being like somebody who's on the run from the mob, like gangsters are after him, and he says he sees it essentially as a mob film, and you can see some of that in what Gary's trying to do. But yeah, I like them all. I mean, as a mythology, I think it all works pretty well. There's interesting ideas in all the films, and I love that one. Hellseeker, where Ashley comes back, and it's she's married this really obnoxious guy, and she's like, in what's going on, and then Doug is in disguise as the guy who does the deal with him with the it's kind of a spherical box, isn't it? And just really interesting. Even the Inferno has got some really interesting ideas, like it's trying to do Bad Lieutenant, and it's like, at least they're doing something different, and it's not like the ones before. I mean, there's one that in Dark Mirages is a book I put together of like treatments and things that didn't get made, and scripts that didn't get made, like Stephen Gallagher's Dracula script for TV. And there's a treatment for like a kind of an outline thing, a treatment of Steve Jones and Michael Marshall Smith, who did their version of like Hellraiser 5, which would have been really, really great. If you ever get a chance to read it, pick up Dark Mirages and read that. But what we did get was interesting as well. I mean, if that one had been made, I think it would have brought it back to where Hellraiser was with 1 and 2, which would have been great. But it didn't. Sadly, it didn't get made. But I think they're all doing something quite interesting in their own way. I'm very forgiving of things anyway. The people would say to me, "Have you seen that so and so, whatever it is? It was rubbish." And we'll have watched it the other week, and we quite enjoyed it. It's like we'll just sit there and watch something. I'm quite forgiving of something if it's doing something interesting as well, and if it's doing something different, or a lot of effort's been put into something. You can see that, and it's for the love of it. You can forgive certain things, can't you? It's like definitely. I as a body of kind of like films, I'd sit and marathon them. It's
yeah.
I mean, too many for a weekend now, I think, these days. But I mean, I have sat and marathoned them, so it's. I mean, sometimes for work, sometimes for pleasure, but it's. I mean, they do kind of the budgets get less as they go along, and then it goes after the fourth one, it goes straight to video and stuff. But I mean, I love all the Friday the 13th. I love all the Nightmare on Elm Streets and all the Halloweens, even the later ones where it went low budget and there were some weird things going on, but they've all got their charms.
I love the fact that there's so much creativity, and as you say, if it's done with some love and it's not just a cash grab on the part of a studio,
no, exactly,
you can always find something.
Yeah, and I mean, you can always use, if you watch things. Sometimes it spins off into ideas as well.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things, a lot of the stuff in the films that I watched, I would take and put little Easter eggs into servants. Like if you can spot them all, you're probably doing well. But the little nods to things here and there, and names, and like Malahide being the name that Chenard was called before it was made. Things like that, just little kind of nods, from all the films. So I suppose I was doing it for a specific reason, but writing those two books. But I enjoy them. I enjoy watching them. It's a good marathon. Is the Hellraiser marathon.
Exactly. I mean, we're a couple of years shy now of this one turning 40. Has your impression of it changed since you first saw it? Does it still give you that shiver of delight when you boot this one up?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do become, the more you watch something, the less it kind of like surprises you, or you still see little things, but the more you watch something, the less it becomes like a kind of shiver of like, oh, God, oh, look at that, look at this, because especially when you've written about it and analysed it, it does tend to kind of like. But I hadn't seen it in a few years, and I watched it last week because I knew it was coming on the show, and I sat there and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's it's one of those films it's never going to get old. Watching it's never going to get old. He's never going to be like the first time, but it's also never going to be like, oh God, not this again. It's always going to be like, you'll watch it, you'll be really entertained, and the performances, the music, everything, it all just comes together. And it's for an hour and a half film as well. It packs a lot in there.
It does. So really does. You think it's still got that edge? Then it deserves its cult classic status. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have things that don't endure this long if they're not. There's a reason that things last. But it's obviously got something to it. It's
definitely.
If it stands the test of time, then I think it's earned its cult status at that point, isn't it? Yeah. That's things aren't around for 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. I mean, look at things like Frankenstein and Dracula and the work of Poe, and and all that kind of stuff. It's lasted like 200 years or more. It's like these things that last for a reason, don't they?
They do. So I'm going to come to you now. Is there anything? First of all, I've got to ask you, who would you consider your MVP in this? As an actor or the character, which who would you, when you watch this movie, who is the standout for you?
Oh, again, I couldn't. Again, it's like choosing your favorite film. Everybody behind the camera and in front of the camera is just magnificent. They're all just like acting their heart out. They all came together to just create this thing, and I don't think. I mean, again, Pinhead is obviously the poster boy, literally the poster boy. So, and he's not in it very much, and that's the one you see on the front of the video that I saw in the video store. Pinhead's face there. So, I mean, I suppose you've got to say Pinhead, and Doug's performance as well is just amazing. No tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering, and the lines are just delivered. So, but everybody in it is just fantastic. All the Cenobites, everybody. They're just acting their hearts out. And you can see it. It's all up there. It's all on the screen.
Definitely. Definitely. I think I'm going to have to give it to Claire Higgins, though. Anybody that's listened to this will probably not be surprised, but
I couldn't narrow it down. Honestly, I couldn't, because everybody is just like, you'd go, yeah, Claire Higgins is amazing, but what about that bit with Andy Robinson? And you think you start to go, I just give it to them all. I just, you know, in front of the camera and behind the camera, everybody just did a fantastic job. And if if you were writing and directing your first film and that was your team, I think you, again, like I say, you'd just be like getting down on your hands and knees and kissing the ground, because you couldn't ask for a better bunch of people or more talented bunch of people. And I'm not just saying that because I know a lot of them. They are like massively talented people, and into the other films as well. And just to see them going around conventions now is just like fills me with delight. That all these years later they're still going around and like wowing the fans and meeting people. It's just really nice. So I couldn't narrow it down. I couldn't narrow it down.
Well, I'm gonna try it again here. Is there any particular aspect of the movie, whether it be a moment, a line of dialogue, anything that makes you go ooh every time you if you condense it down, is there anything that just gives you shivers every time you see it?
There are a few. I mean, obviously, again, it's like when Kirsty solves the puzzle box for the first time, and then all the Cenobites appear. I mean, she goes down the corridor first, and the engineer's there. But when she comes back, and Nick is there, and he sticks the fingers in her mouth and stuff. And I've heard stories about the filming of that as well. But like, because Nick couldn't see a thing, he was blind as a bat. As Chatterer, but just like them appearing, and each individually like appears, and with a little crackle of the lightning stuff around them and everything, and then Doug delivers his lines and Grace joins in and stuff. That every time, that kind of just the hairs on the back of my neck just go,
That's honestly, that's exactly what I've got written down here. So,
brilliant. I'm not far off the mark then.
Yeah. So,
in fact, I love that scene so much that was one of the reasons I wanted to do Servants of Hell, because I wanted to recreate that scene with Sherlock Holmes solving the puzzle box, and my versions of the Cenobites appear around him in the same way, with the walls kind of like lighting up and stuff, and the kind of the tolling of the bell. I had such fun writing that scene. I can't tell you.
Brilliant, mate.
Now, as always, we asked what you out there thought of the movie in question. And, once again, you didn't disappoint. So we're going to summon our own little entity for this one in the shape of Vian. So, Vian, what were people's opinions on Hellraiser?
Jesus wept. There were some interesting responses to this one. Charbouchan, it will tear your soul apart. James Stewart, 5, probably right next to Nightmare on Elm Street, as one of the best 80s horror debuts. Both of the leading ladies are flawless, curly-haired scream queens. James Aaron is great until the last 10 minutes or so, then it falls apart with the unnecessarily and poorly executed monsters. That seems to be a recurring theme in the comments. A lot of people were not so crazy about the ending. Seems to be the downfall of this for some people. Can't say I agree, but... Georgios Kariotis, 6, close with the second part. Hellbound. Corey Hallman, 5 out of 5. Kevin Connell, 5, except for the confused conclusion. Jerry Ferguson, 5 out of 5. Love the series, even if some of the sequels after 3 get a bit bad. Keith Forbes, 6 stars. E.C. Nelson, 4 or 5. Done deal. Dylan Jamel, 5 stars. So the consensus really seems to be what brings it down is the ending, which, I'm not going to give away obviously spoilers, this movie's been out for a very long time, but I don't want to give away too much. I can't say I entirely agree with that. Personally, my first experience with Hellraiser, the original, was at an LGBTQIA plus bar in my 20s. Of course, I was aware of it as part of the lexicon of modern horror, especially particularly 80s horror. We're really getting down to it. Of course, I was aware of Pinhead. I was aware of Hellraiser, but I hadn't really sat down and watched it. And so I was at this bar, and I didn't drink at the time, and so I was the DD. I was the designated driver. And the bar I was at had the main part where there was the main bar, the stage, the dance area, everything, and then they had this little back bar where it was just in a back room and you could just sit at the bar, and they always had horror movies playing. And I went in one day and I'm sitting in the back while my friends are having fun, and they're playing Hellraiser, and I'm just kind of watching it. There's a lot of other sound going on, but I'm like, what the fuck am I watching? And I knew it was Hellraiser, but seeing in that atmosphere was really, really interesting for me, particularly because I was not quite aware of the powerhouse that is Andrew J. Robinson at that time. So that was my first real experience with Hellraiser, and I was like, this is fascinating. The practical effects alone, to me, gives it a 5 out of 5, because I think the practical effects are groundbreaking. The story really was avant-garde for its time. It really did set a whole new precedent for horror and horror storytelling, in terms of not just, in the 80s, we got a lot of slasher fix, we got a lot of re-upping of that kind of story, but this was very, very different. And so I think it really set a precedent for what horror could do. Is it my favorite horror movie of all time? No. I think seeing Andy Robinson in the finale with brown eyes and saying things like, "Come to daddy," just like hurts my soul. It feels so wrong. But he does it so, so well. And everybody in this really gives everything to their performance. And even the asshole Frank, he's such a prick. But there's just so much to dissect in this film, even in the scenes that are not horror driven. Like the scene, when I first met Andy Robinson, actually at a Star Trek convention of all things, I asked him about the scene where his character, Larry, poor Larry, is going to sleep with his wife, Julia, who's in love, or at least obsessed with his brother. And then she's like, no, I can't bear it. But she's actually talking to his brother, Frank. And there's this dynamic where where Larry keeps going, right? And he breaks off at the last second and is like, was he going to rape his wife? Is this saying he's going to essay his wife? And there's this underlying darkness to even the good character? Or, was this just a product of his time? Or there's so much to pick apart piece by piece, scene by scene in this movie. It really is. Clive Barker made a work of art. And even though, like I said, it's not my absolute favorite, it's not one I watch over and over and over, it really did do something new and different and exciting. And I think that's something we really need to talk about. So for the people who gave it 4 out of 5 stars, I guess I kind of get why you say that, but the practical effects alone make this such a masterpiece. And anyway, with all of that, back to you, TK.
Many thanks, Vian. As always, it's very much appreciated. And hopefully we'll see you again next time. And once again, thank you to you out there for dropping your thoughts on this movie with us here today on the show. If you didn't get to have your say and want to let us know just how you feel on this or any other episode, then hit us up on social media. In the words of a certain doctor, we have to see, we have to know.
So it's time to give our final thoughts on this one, followed by our ranking out of 5. So as is customary, I'm going to come to our guest first for this one. So Paul, what are your concluding thoughts on Clive Barker's Hellraiser, and score out of 5, please?
Final thoughts. I don't know. I suppose just a word: obsession. For me, it's just an obsession. I mean, just a great film. I mean, if you've never seen it, go away and watch it. I highly recommend it, and then go away and buy the books and read about it. All the work that went into the books and the interview book and everything. But buy anything that you can get your hands on. Not just by me, but other people as well. And obviously 10 out of 5. if I can be so bold.
That's fair enough. I've got a love-hate with this one. It's beautiful in a grotesque way, but it's not an easy watch at times. It's not your average slasher movie. It's not one of those films that you can put on and have in the background, to me anyway. It commands you to watch it, and you'll either be glad you did or just utterly appalled it even exists. I'm kind of in both camps. I've got a tremendous fondness for it, but every time I sit down to watch it, I feel, as I said earlier, I feel dirty, as though privy to some secrets I shouldn't be a party to. It makes me uncomfortable, but that's, again, I'm guessing that's what horror should be.
Yeah,
For a
yeah.
theatrical debut, Barker knocked it out of the park with this. The acting's solid, the writing gives each performer time to breathe, the atmosphere is on a whole other level to other genre movies of the time, and it's still unique to this day. It's a slow burn, but it's all the more terrifying for it. Then there's the effects. I'll always be an advocate for practical effect over CG, and while they may have dated a little, I still think they're to be admired for their creativity. And nowhere is that more on display than with the Cenobites, whose look has influenced a generation of moviegoers. They're iconic, and so is this movie. And I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. So with your... I have to limit it at 5. Sorry, Paul. But it gives Hellraiser a combined score of 4.5 out of 5. So I mean,
that's not bad.
No, it's not. I mean, by being just you and me, it allows for a little less variation.
Yeah.
But I'll be completely honest. Regardless of how many guests we have on the show, it does balance out. So, I think it's a pretty fair score.
Absolutely.
It's not perfect, but it's far from our worst. It's up in the top tier.
I think if any film can make you feel something, as opposed to just sitting there and not caring or not feeling anything, even if it's kind of a revulsion at certain things, if a film's doing that to you, then it's doing something. It's doing something right, isn't it? So even if you hate it when you watch it, that there will be that hatred or that kind of like aversion to some of the effects or whatever it is making you feel something. So I will, I'll just throw that in.
So you think, pun not intended, we pretty much nailed that one?
I think so. Yeah, I reckon we did. Yeah.
Nice. So, I mean, I don't think it's lost its ability to affect after all these years. Some aspects may have dated slightly, but I'm mostly thinking of Kirsty's boyfriend's shirt.
Yeah.
The story, the acting, and subtext, to me, they still hold sway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
Nice one. So, once again, that's it from us on Cult Classics this month. We hope you out there have found it as pleasurable as possible with only the slightest hint of pain. And if so, and you're a regular listener, then, come on, you love it, you deviants. I've certainly had a really great time on this one. And I can only judge it by the company. Which is this. This has been the amazing Paul Kane. So thank you for joining me on this today, buddy.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for asking me. I've enjoyed it.
Fantastic. What you've had a good time then? Was it a Larry or a Frank in your estimation?
Oh, it was a Larry. Well, I mean, Frank's having a good time. So I mean, yeah, a bit of both. But I've still really enjoyed it. Yeah. I've enjoyed revisiting it as well, coming back and having a look after a little break, So, yeah.
Brilliant. I thought for a second I was worried you were going to say it's never enough and then get up and leave. But I'm glad you've had a good time. If the opportunity arises, would you be up for a return at some point?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, anytime. Yeah, yeah. Always up for any. I shouldn't say that. Should have been a Hellraiser show. Always up for anything, anytime. Dear,
we're falling down so much on this.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if you'd like to hear more from Paul or check out some of his work, both in the Hellraiser universe and beyond, please check out his website. And the majority of his work can be also found in bookshops, which are going to be handily linked for your further consumption in the description for this episode. However, while he's here, is there anything else you'd like the listeners to check out? Should they be so inclined?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Yeah, I think I can't think of anything.
Cool.
But yeah, just keep checking the site and the news updates and things, and come and hassle me on social media. Come and watch the Saturday Night Chillers with us.
You heard it here, folks. Go and stalk him.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. check out those links in the description, and you'll thank us for it. Trust me. And while we're on the subject of thanks, thank you to you out there for coming with us on this journey of discovery this time around. Whether it was heaven or hell, I'll leave that for you to decide. However it's the former, then please consider leaving us a tip on our Ko-fi account. We can only make these with your support, and we're incredibly grateful for everything you do. And as always, if you had fun, please like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to check out our regular and classic silver screen shows. Next month, we'll have another treat for you lucky people as we take a look at the overlooked but nonetheless iconic 80s teen comedy, Better Off Dead. And once again, if you're a fan of that one, we have got a nice little surprise waiting for you. So mark your calendars, and we'll see you next time. Until then, don't play with any strange boxes, and remember, we can all be happy here. Good night.
You have been listening to the Cult Classics Show, part of the Silver Screen Podcast. Created, written, and hosted by TK. Produced by Mike Wilson. Editing by Nick. Feedback section produced by Lady VN. Opening credits by Ian Sanderson. Music by Timeless Journey. Follow us on social media. Links to all of our social media pages can be found on our link tree. This podcast is part of the Mike's Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Silver Screen Podcast or Mike's Podcasts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time. And remember, no matter where you go, there you are.